Hey folks, I'm gonna try to do like a different angle. I'm always like doing the same angle, just like the worst, everybody's worst angle. Try to but that's just the easy way to hold the friggin' phone. Uh, anyway, I'll see how long I can like even hold this. It's um, anyway, I just, I was like smoking weed and, watching YouTube videos. So, basically I decided it's time for me to provide my hot takes to the world through YouTube. And just, I was watching a Jimmy Dore video I watched one video where he was mentioning how he had called the police one time and like they took like 2 hours or something to arrive for like an emergency. I think there was somebody outside with a knife or with a gun, I think, or I don't know, shooting or I don't know what, something big, and like cops wouldn't come. He lives in like LA, like in or Burbank, or I don't know. He lives like basically LA. And so he was saying, but he said that like, and he's like, that's why people don't trust cops, and that's also why like some people like to have their own guns, which for the like that seems like an obvious thing in some way, but for the left, for a lot of the visible left, that's like a no. And I mean, increasingly less so. Increasingly, like a lot of leftists have gotten on board with the Second Amendment, the way the old leftists were, But for Jimmy, it's a big step because he was really anti-gun. Apparently, he was pro Second Amendment. He was like pro, then anti, then pro, then anti. But now apparently he's at least not anti. I think it's like he basically acknowledged that his he doesn't really know what he's talking. Like he wasn't quite sure of his position on that, and because he was basically saying, he said that he kind of was fluctuating between like either just ban all guns, or at least he's like, no, I'm going to compromise and make a national registry of all guns mandatory. And it's just so dumb, But anyway, bless his soul, like he caught himself on once people informed him of like, that, yeah, because he's surrounded by a lot of people who know that's ridiculous, who come to him for other takes, like better takes, better positions. And so I'm sure they quickly told him, and his comment section told him, the comment section of his videos is pro Second Amendment, pretty much, to the extent that it's either way. And so anyway, I just want to acknowledge that and say, acknowledge that he did that, and that's great, and it kind of undoes the, remedies the worst flaw in his politics, which was that. I think that's probably at least the worst flaw, or one of the worst. That might, to me, that was the worst flaw that I could point to, was that in terms of why I would be conflicted if he like ran for president, like people want him to run for president. he just says he doesn't want to do it, like, so I'm guessing he's not going to do it, but that would be an impediment for me if he was like really thinking that gun control is the way that we're going to solve crime and stop murders and stuff like this. That would be a big red flag. So anyway, like, it seems like he's coming around a bit where he mentioned the fact that, like, this is probably why, or this is why, the fact that cops take so long to get to your house is why some people want to have their own guns. And he didn't add anything anti-gun onto that statement. So to me, for him, I think that's like a big step. And he's, but I also had to acknowledge that it's one of the first steps, and not to, to remember that, like, he has been very flawed on that issue and on some other issues, and he often is all over the place. And so while he probably be a better president, I would guess, than any of the mainstream people, there could be like better, more ideal candidates, hopefully. I mean, we have to do away with this monarchist system, like, it's a funny thing where people talk about monarchy and they're like, oh yeah, we ended monarchy here with the revolution, but like, we just ended, we temporarily ended monarchy, because during the revolution we had no monarchy. There was just every state was governed by its assembly, and then the national government and army and Congress, whatever, were governed just by all the members of the Continental Congress, each of whom had an equal vote. And there was no hierarchy of the kind that, like, exists now. Like, there was a secretary and a president, but the president's powers were pretty circumscribed. Like, I think, like, they were the presiding officer, but like they couldn't, they didn't have a veto. And I think the most that they could do was, there might have been some way that they could stall legislation and send it back to but I'm not even sure exactly. Like, I think in general, the position of the president was largely symbolic, and also just like an actual executive officer, in the sense that he executes whatever the decisions of Congress are. He's like kind of the servant of Congress, and is their does their bidding, basically. I mean, I'm not sure all exactly, but that's the general contour of it. Like, because without the veto, it's not, it's all about the veto. And what is the veto but the royal veto? It's the royal veto of England, of all these places. So, like, things go through Parliament in Britain, and goes through the House of Commons, then it goes to the House of Lords. The House of Lords and the king or queen both have vetoes, basically. And like now it seems like in the UK that power, the royal power, has been effectively transferred to the Prime Minister. But nevertheless, it's still monarchist. So, the UK is still a monarchy, very much so, and the US is a monarchy because of the Constitution. The Constitution, it's a weird thing, like, that people don't understand that the US Constitution was the beginning of the end of American liberty. I mean, I guess you could argue it either way, but like the US was very free and egalitarian during the revolution, and it freaked out like the ruling class, and so they led a counter-revolution, which was the Constitution, which was establishing monarchy. And the people at the a lot of the moving forces in this movement, in fact, almost all the moving forces in that movement wanted it to be hereditary. A hereditary monarchy, hereditary Senate. But they realized that they couldn't really get that. They couldn't get enough people to go along with that, because there was too many people, even among the elites, that had sense and realized there would be instant civil war, second revolution. And so they couldn't really do that, but they still established a monarchy where there was not one previously. And it was an explicit attack against the Pennsylvania Constitution, which was considered to be the radical, the really populist constitution, and was the basis for the French Revolutionary Constitution. It was also the basis for the Vermont Constitution, and for the Georgia Constitution, and for the first Tennessee Constitution of Frankland, as it was called. And it was like the inspiration for like all the kind of radical people, populist people in the world. And so, whereas the federal constitution that came later was explicitly modeled on Britain, just on the British government. So it was a rebuke of the American principles of the Pennsylvania Constitution. So anyway, so you live under a monarchy, this idea that like the revolution saved us from monarchy. Yes, it's true. It temporarily saved us from monarchy, but not even for a generation, just for like a decade or two. So, because if you elect your monarch, I mean, it's great that, if it actually worked, right? Like the fact that you switch monarchs every 4 years, if it actually was democratic, that would be better than just having one monarch for life or whatever. But it's at the same time, it's maybe not better because it's still monarchy. I mean, no, it is better to have more control over it, I'd say, but either way, it's still ridiculous because you're still going by this idea that you should just choose one person to have like to basically control everybody else. That's somehow a good idea. Oh, how could that go wrong? That's never gone wrong. Like that's where it's coming from. And so if you live in any country where there's a head of state that exercises veto powers over legislation, or indeed can even originate and enact legislation of their own, of some kind, policy, then you live under a monarchy. I've lived my whole life in a monarchy, and it's good to remember. Anyway, but like, but if we're gonna have to have like some elected monarch, it'd be better Jimmy Dore probably than like some mainstream politician, especially now that he's shown a willingness to move on the, to change on the gun issue. But there still could be better candidates who have been better on that issue for a longer time, since it's an important issue. It's the issue that it's kind of the right that arguably underpins all other rights. The right of, armed resistance, when it comes down to it, is inseparable from the right to bear arms. And anyway, so like, but he had also another video where he was talking to Jackson Hinkle about China, and I guess Hinkle was like correcting him on some videos, that Hinkle was saying some videos were misportrayed, of showing the fire in China, that where they couldn't get the fire engine close enough for the water to reach to the fire, and people were saying it was from zero COVID policies caused it, but then later other people were saying that it was just a bunch of cars were blocking the way. So who knows? But it's funny how much of a cucked, tanky, like, Jackson Hinkle is, like I respect a lot of his positions on things. I respect the fact that he's willing to call himself a communist. I call myself a communist. But what he means by that and what I mean by that are like probably worlds away. Like for him, he associates communism in a way the same as what conservatives do, where they associate it with quote unquote communist regimes, like the Russia or China or Cuba or something. Whereas for me, like, I don't consider those regimes to be communist, and I mean, maybe Cuba more than the others, but I don't, they're monarchists. You can't be monarchist and communist, literally the opposite. I mean, it's like communist means the whole community governs. Monarchist means one guy. So it's hilarious to me that people can still try to claim that that's real communism. Like, they might follow some few policies that are associated with communism or something, or socialism, but that's not communism. Communism is democracy, like complete democracy of including economic democracy. So, but anyway, it's just funny, like, he's willing to like shill for like the Chinese government, and it makes me wonder, like, why would anybody, maybe he found some niche on the internet of like, maybe that's just his thing. Like, it was so funny. Jimmy's like, so is it true that like China like censors people, that, you know, that there was a report that they would censor like World Cup coverage because so that they could edit out anything showing people without masks, because people would like riot when they saw like that the world is not wearing masks and they're all like hanging out in these amphitheaters or whatever. And Jackson's like, well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, the Chinese government does do some censoring, but you know, for their sovereignty, it's like some of these people are so, this sovereignty narrative of a certain type of people that are supposedly anti-imperialists. That's what they say. But it just means they're against the US and the UK, and then they shill for whoever's against or ostensibly against the US and UK. So basically BRICS, like Brazil, Russia, China, India, or something like that. Anyway, anyone that you know, claims to be that whatever, the great lesser evil or something. And so this dude's like, I don't know, it was just sad. So then he says that that they censor